Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mining Now. I'm your host, Jared Downey. Okay, today on the show, we have a part two. It's been a year since PX4 has been on the show, and it was overdue because they've had a lot going on, a lot to update. We've got them back on the show. Toby, Bill, Claire. Well, Claire, you're not with PX4. You're the case study for this episode.
I am.
But thank you, everyone, for being here.
Great to be here again.
Yeah, thank you.
You've got this is the most people we've had on in our little space here for Mining Now, so we're all packed in here.
We win the record so far.
Oh, don't make it a competition. Someone's going to come in and. Okay, so but originally we were going to do it separately. Claire, you were going to come in the second half, but I just felt like some of the topics were covered. I wanted to get it because you're with NewRange Copper, right? Mm-hmm. I wanted to get sort of a full perspective as we're walking through what's been updated with PX4. But let's do an introduction. So, Bill, can we introduce you first for people that haven't seen you before?
Yeah, sure, Jared. So I'm the chair, managing director of PX4. Been in the game very long time in accessing exploration and mining approvals throughout the world, mainly in Queensland and in Australia. And I guess the methodology about our software has come from my 40-odd years in the game. And then that's been handed to Donna, who's our director of product, and she's built the stack, our own stack, to create what we have today. And Toby is the man who's taken it to market.
Okay, Toby.
Nice little segue.
Yeah, well done. It's like you've done this before.
So I'm Toby Carrigan. I'm the general manager of PX4. Very, very excited to be here again and to be able to tell the tale of not just the last 12 months, but to continue on to build the story about PX4. I was a lawyer once upon a time, but fully reformed now, thankfully. And sort of.
I'm the opposite. I think lawyer. I mean, obviously, some cases they're not great, but I've actually always been amazed by the law profession. But anyway,
I'll take it.
But I'll still tell the jokes. But yeah.
But no, yeah, really excited to be here and excited to tell the story. And yeah, we've had a really exciting 12 months, and we only see it continuing into the future. And fantastic to have Claire with us today. So maybe I'll try and do a segue as well over to you, Claire.
Oh, perfect. Look at this. We're all mixing. We're all mixing. This is good. No, yeah, so I'll give a little intro. I'm Claire Sebald. I work at NewRange Copper Nickel, which is out of Minnesota, and I'm the communities and land lead there. And we've been working on the joint venture that happened in February earlier this year. And so it's a joint venture between Teck, Polymet, and then Glencore owns Polymet as well. So we've got a few partners in the mix. And previously, before that, I worked on Teck. So I came from that side of things. And I worked primarily in the US for land management, and then also a little bit in the exploration permitting realm.
This is one of those interviews. There's so much I want to cover, and then I'm thinking, if I don't ask a question, just ask a question for me, because I want to get some of these things discussed on the show. Maybe Toby, can we kind of jump back over to you and just go through when you first came on the show, you were really scaling up. I think that was PX4's first kind of North American. You'd kind of done a tour.
Yeah.
Now a lot has developed. Can you sort of give us an update on where that's at?
Yeah, absolutely. So last time we were here, we had just finished our tour of Alaska. So we had just released our Alaskan solution.
That's right.
So again, to maybe go back one step further, PX4 specializes in jurisdictionally specific tenement and land management software. So all of your key exploration licenses, your mining leases, any of those authorities or permits that are required to do all of the exploration and the mining activities on the ground, our system tracks in a very jurisdictionally specific way. So it's not just your mining claims or your mining leases, it's also your associated permits, your licenses, any of those secondary or tertiary permits that are required to actually be on the ground. And our system is all based on compliance and governance and being able to demonstrate that you've done all of the things that the regulations in your jurisdiction tell you need to do. Mm-hmm. So last time we were here, we had just finished our Alaskan product. So we had built Alaskan specific workflows covering, the BLM and federal claims for Alaska. But in the last 12 months, we've now expanded out to 20 international jurisdictions. So obviously we're an Australian-based company. So all of our Australian jurisdictions are built into the system. We've got 6 or 7 African countries specifically built into the system. In the US, we've now got Alaska, Nevada, Minnesota, obviously, that we've built with NewRange Copper, and we're currently working on Arizona. And then in Canada, we've very recently finished Quebec and Ontario, and we're currently working to finalize BC. So a really, really exciting expansion in terms of the jurisdictions we're operating in. We've also expanded into the different types of legislation we're capturing. So not just mineral and coal, we also do a lot of petroleum and gas.
Oh, is that new?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So at the moment, more in Australia, but again, it's the same process we go through. It's just a different act or a different regulation that we build workflows for.
Right.
So we're covering petroleum and gas now in many jurisdictions, but also in terms of the product. The product has expanded a lot in the last 12 months. So I think last time we were on, we discussed that we'd had some interest and some engagement from one of the big majors out of WA. That kind of continues, and we've now got engagement from some really, really exciting players around the world. And what that's driving is additional modules and additional functionality within the system. So again, I've kind of mentioned the permitting and the licensing side of things, but typically when you've got a mine site or an exploration site, it's not just your mining lease or your exploration license that you have. You've also got agreements with landowners, with First Nations people, with JV companies, where there are obligations that are owed between those parties. So our system now tracks all of those as well, and agreement condition compliance is something that we've recently expanded out into. But more than that, within those parties and with the communities that you're discussing with on the ground, we've also launched a stakeholder engagement, stakeholder communications module. So tracking all of those conversations on the ground, your phone calls with native title parties or with First Nations peoples, all of those communications and discussions are now captured and associated and linked back to your mining lease. So come annual reporting time, instead of having to search through people's emails and spreadsheets to find out who's spoken to who and who's actually engaged with the parties on the ground, at the click of a button in our system, you can download a report that shows you all of those engagements and who you've spoken with.
Wow.
So there's been some really exciting expansion functionality-wise as well.
So what Toby's referring to is that there's many jurisdictions around the world that communication, stakeholder communications, is a governance requirement that you must comply and do it each year. So it makes sense to have it in the system. It's linked to the title. It's linked to the exploration or the mining lease.
Right.
As are a number of these other functions. And we had one group, one of the majors in Australia, has an enormous number of objections against their tenements in one of the busiest jurisdictions in Australia. And they specifically wanted a tool to be able to coordinate and address all that. You have 4 or 5 people, you've got lawyers involved, and you've got keyword
lawyers,
witnesses.
Again.
So you have a plethora of different people, not always in-house, and they're losing track of where the documents are, the times, the dates. So we'll be able to consolidate that specifically in that jurisdiction. So we've had some sort of fantastic engagement with majors building things, as well as a number of other companies building things around the world.
So when you say building, you're talking about actual customization building?
Yeah. No. It's not customization, because we don't like to build only one solution that only works for you.
Okay.
What we're trying to build is functionality that's scalable across every organization.
Based on client demand.
Exactly.
Though. Right. Oh, I see.
So a client that has a very specific demand, so this company Bill's talking about with objections, yes, they wanted an objections module, and we worked very closely with them to make sure the solution resolved their issues. But that same solution is scalable to any other business with an objection against their claims as well. That's
within that jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Within that jurisdiction.
Yeah, so anyone that can buy that now on the platform.
Yeah, I want to get into some of this onboarding a specific jurisdiction, and because I think that's an important topic. But Claire, I wanted to actually bring you in here because I wanted to understand the reverse, the old way of doing it. Can you sort of paint a picture? And I mean, PX4 is the guest on here, so it's a shameless plug in some ways. But I'm actually trying to understand the process that would have been used, but also then how PX4 even technically plugged into what you needed.
Yeah. And it's so a lot of times you'll find within a mixture of junior mining companies as well as just bigger players, you've got a mixture of their ability to manage their assets well. And, more and more there's greater risk to the changes within the legislation as well as changes within each jurisdiction and the stakeholders that you're working with. So, I've come across a few different people that have definitely managed in different ways. You got the good old boys that have followed it like it's been doing for the longest time, which is Excel spreadsheets. You're working off of just paper, memory, even if it's for a smaller project in general. But you're risking everything to maintain it through that. You're not hitting your compliance. You're not even able to report on all of the connections that you've made, all of the updates to even just agreements in general. So you've got people playing at that level, and then you've got people playing at a level where the specific land management system they're using it's not staying up to date, and it's very general, it's broad, the workflows within it aren't being used for each jurisdiction, where here, so you can use a US jurisdiction, but they're diving more into the regulations and the legislation in each state, so in each province. And so it's definitely more personalized to the jurisdiction at least. And they've got the flexibility within that to build that with you and help you lead with them in the build.
So just to jump in, we have 20 jurisdictions now around the world. We've got a huge roadmap of more. And we don't know where that will stop. But of that 20, what that means is we have the Mining Act for each and every one of those 20 now embedded within our workflow engine, driving the specificity that we talk about for Minnesota, we talk about for Alaska, we talk about, well, BC will have it, Ontario, Quebec. It's absolutely their act, taken out, put in our engine, and you can hit the button for BC, you can hit the button for Quebec, you can hit the button for Minnesota. It's specific to that title.
And that's what's rare about, I would say, this program in general, is you don't find that. They're looking at a very kind of broader like placeholder for where people can put in agreements, put in licenses, and get some type of action result back.
Right.
Where this is a little bit more intuitive. It thinks on its own. And once you build it, it will script you into being able to perform any tasks that you need within that jurisdiction.
So essentially an older way of doing it, going a step above like notes in memory and Excel spreadsheets, would be basically lawyers coming in, trying to get all this up-to-date information, but then a year later it's changed.
Yeah.
And now you got to go back in, go through it all again. So that would sort of be a standard procedure, something like that. And then you're kind of, as a company, do companies ever try just to do it as close as they can and then basically wait for like the government to come in and say, this needs to be fixed? Well, you were saying about the company in Australia that they had like several things that needed to be fixed, right? So are they just trying to get as close as they can? I'm just trying to get a concept of an old way of doing it versus now. And
it's still definitely something people are transitioning towards and thinking of like getting ahead of it. But again, I don't think anyone has been able to within the industry to be able to track all of that legislation at the same time. Like you're working with government affairs within your organization.
Yeah.
You're working with so many different people, associations that are both fighting and also tracking all of these potential changes. So you've got to keep all of that up to date in your own mind in an organization, but having a system and a group and a program that would actually just do that for you.
Yeah.
Game
So
changer.
I think the point you're trying to make there, Jared, is that when you're on an Excel spreadsheet or you've got paper copies of things and spreadsheets in that way, you have to update them every day. It's not an automatic update, and it's not giving you an automatic notification
to do this
or to do that. Or it doesn't allow you to download all the data and actually just submit the report or do this function. So you're at risk there of missing something. If that person running those Excel spreadsheets gets sick and hasn't actually identified what's coming up in the future, the company may miss something, lose something, then their claim is jumped.
Right. Kind of turns it into a reactive environment.
Yeah, they're reactive. Whereas this is where we're totally proactive in front of the ball the whole time.
Yeah.
You know?
I think also we're seeing that, within any size company, there's a lot of transition with workforce as well.
And I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah.
And when you have instances where you have someone who's really crucial and it's kind of the one point of failure for a lot of this compliance management and obligation management, if they leave, it just leaves everyone in the lurch because so much of that information is managed in their own mind or is in their inbox or, is managed in their own way. So you lose all that human IP, not just with your licenses, but really seriously with your agreement negotiation as well. We know in Canada that it's that First Nations engagement is really crucial. And it's the same in Australia. Without native title consent, you're not going to be able to do anything on the ground. And if you've had someone go out and been negotiating an agreement for 6 months, and then that person leaves, and you've got no evidence of the discussions or the communication or the progress that's been made in that time, it's not a good look to then go back to that party and start again with someone new. So losing that continuity is also really, really important.
Is the from the stakeholder standpoint, I imagine that's a huge component of everything you're doing. Do the stakeholders have access, or how is what you're bringing together for the client distributed to the stakeholders?
So it's still, there are lots of options, but traditionally it's managed by the company. So, NewRange Copper have their own system that manage all of their stakeholders and all the interactions with their stakeholders. But something that we're currently talking about is building systems for a lot of those other parties. So, local councils, departments, the First Nations groups. But it's more around being able to have one source of truth for all of that information. So
then your company is the one that has that.
Yes.
You're the sort of at the center of that.
Yeah. But something that companies can also do, or clients of ours can do, is also invite consultants and lawyers into their system.
Right.
So if you've got a legal team that you're working with that's helping you negotiate an agreement, for example, you can invite them into PX4, and then rather than you having to provide all of the emails and the history of the communications and all the documentation to the legal team, it's all there in your system.
Yeah.
So the legal team comes in and can access that data real time and can be inputting their side of things into that same platform. And then once that agreement's negotiated and signed and sealed and delivered, if you don't need that legal support anymore, you remove their access.
Right.
And that also goes for the actual senior management of the corporation or at the corporate level. They've got vision. So in Minnesota here at the project, they can come in, the CEO for the whole project can come in and see where everything is and download and create documents they may need themselves for the board of all sorts. And anyone in the organisation can do that. So in terms of Claire's day-to-day work, she's now not inundated, give me this report, give me that report, do this. As that senior team learns, they can actually do a lot of those tasks themselves at the click of the button and get specifically what they need out of the system for whatever their role or need is at the time.
I think it's a really important point you make there, Billy, because we've seen this. We did a market review of all of the systems that were in this space in 2016. And a lot of those systems, and even the discussion around Excel, that's one person or one team, hidden away in a dark room that are managing your key assets. Because at the end of the day, your mining site, that's a tenement, that's a claim. You lose that, you lose access to the whole thing. And a lot of these platforms are typically managed by one person. The PX4 concept is having that information and that platform accessible across the whole business.
Yeah.
So we're removing that information bottleneck and allowing that person to then be the value-adding, strategically minded person rather than dealing with those administrative, Claire, send me a report on our action list for the next month, because that person that wants that information has access
so
to
it sort
themselves.
of changes your role then when facilitating it.
Yeah, and it would, as you start to integrate some of the data into it, you're going to be, inundated with that. But overall, it's supposed to take a lot of that administrative work off of your hands. That is typical for any land ban within this area and jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful in that way to have that stress also behind you, and you can move forward in so many other tasks that are necessary.
Yeah.
So then imagine that Claire's role expands and the company now has a project in North Dakota. and we have the North Dakota product, or maybe it has one in Ontario. Claire just hits the button, turns Ontario on, and there she is with everything she needs to do.
Well, this leads me to me a big one whenever I'm talking to a company, and some companies have trouble answering it because is the onboarding side buy-in. You know, people at C-level, whoever needs to be privy to this information. What was the onboarding process like on your end bringing in PX4?
It was necessary that we needed a land management system, especially for a newer company that was coming on. It's one thing that's always concern for risk management with assets in general. I don't think there are many concerns. You know, they've got the security clearance that works well, and you know, they're cloud-based, which is super helpful for any organization that's even still building some of their IT stuff. So it was a really easy onboard for the organization because some of those other systems go on-prem. So you're working within a different platform that's not so easy to mend within a different system. In that integration, you're working through building your own IT system in a company. So this joint venture formed, and it's a smaller thing.
Oh, you're talking about the stakeholders, the techs, and like the stakeholders putting everything together.
The two joint venture partners coming together with all their data.
With all their data.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So like that's some type of onboarding that had to come together to sort that out, but also understanding where all of this data that once it comes in here, where is it going to go? And any organization knows that it's a big risk if you don't have a managed asset system well. And to make sure that you can maintain that sense of control and those narratives within it is crucial to show your upper parent partners that the asset is good, it's in maintenance, there's other work going on, and you can show that within the level.
I think also from memory, you did a bit of a review of some other systems as well, and obviously PX4 was successful.
Which systems? No.
But we see a lot of that, you know, which is a fantastic thing, where a company goes through and identifies the things and the areas that they're trying to resolve, and they go to tender for it. But the key thing is always going to be, show me how you're going to protect the asset. And if you're in a complex legislative jurisdiction and the system is built specifically for operation in that jurisdiction, you know, it makes a lot of sense. It eliminates that risk of missing actions that you don't know about, or having a legislative update that changes what you need to be reporting on, or the dates that you're working with. So having that point of differentiation for PX4 helps us a lot when it comes to projects like this.
Yeah. And that's way better than what I was trying to say.
I was adding more.
No, it's good. It's good.
So specifically, when we go into a new jurisdiction, so right now in BC, we have experts that have opened up the BC Mining Act and regs, and are working through all the different authorities from the cradle to the grave, from the beginning of the application to when it's dead, and all the approval processes and renewals and costs and everything in it. And we strip all that data out. Now, looking at an act itself, with a lawyer's hat on, because bloody lawyers, right? It's all black and white, black and white, black and white. But we take that data, and then using an expert like Claire, as well as having access to the actual mines department, we identify the grey, because you can't always implement an act of parliament in black and white. A government department will have a set of guidelines on how they do things to make it work. So there's the grey. So it's really important for us, for our clients. They don't want to work in the black and white. They want to work, how is it actually working? That's a lot in the grey. So we get all of that into the workflow engine for that jurisdiction. So it will work exactly the way everybody in BC needs this to work. That's how it will work. That's how Minnesota works, all of the other jurisdictions. It's specific to how that jurisdiction actually operates at the departmental level.
Okay, so this is a good time to sort of circle back to something I wanted to ask. I wanted to actually specifically get Claire on to answer some of the questions, so I skipped this one, but I want to circle back to it. When you're talking about, you talked about some of these new jurisdictions you're in. And I just want to sort of walk through the process of actually onboarding a jurisdiction. I don't even know if I'm actually asking that right, but let's just walk us through whatever that process is to get it in your system, get it onboarded for your clients, whatever that is.
When we hear onboarding, I hear data entry. That's what I hear in terms of onboarding. I think where the question is getting at, how long does it take us to build a new jurisdiction and get a client like Claire into the platform?
Yeah.
It does vary. It varies based on the complexity of the jurisdiction, but primarily it varies on the number of licenses or the number of authorities we need to get into the system. So if you're in a jurisdiction that's really simple, it's only got a mining lease and an exploration license, it might take us about 6 or 7 weeks to go from process mapping those two authority types into the pro forma documentation, into scripting it into the workflow engine, to testing, to then go live. But for a jurisdiction that's got 5 or 6 or 10 different authority types, it can take another couple of weeks. But once we start the process, typically we like to finish one license type at a time. Like we've got multiple teams that are operating across this life cycle. So again, we're working closely with Claire, and once that first, if it's the mining lease, for example, goes live, we give that to Claire and her team to play with and to test themselves to make sure they're comfortable with it while we continue to develop more of those authorities in the background. Once we have a product that's ready to rock and roll, we've finished Minnesota and we're ready to take that to the market and for NewRange to use the system, the onboarding process to get their data in there is another story. So in jurisdictions where the departments are really open with their data, we can build API integrations, or we can slurp information straight from the department's website. In instances like with NewRange, there was a pro forma document we provided to onboard all of those claims. So we kind of go through a data mapping exercise where we take the existing information, where does it need to live within PX4, and we build a tool, a one-time script that sucks all that data in. And we're currently finalizing an agreements onboarding tool that will also allow us to bulk upload all of your existing agreements. So the onboarding process is becoming more and more automated as we go.
From the client side.
Correct.
Right. Oh, to match, because you need to match them up.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But again, in certain jurisdictions, you can actually take the information directly from the department as well. In places like Alaska, we've built a system that slurps the information straight from the department to populate your PX4 environment.
Right. Sorry, you look like you were going to jump in there.
Oh, I was just going to, confirm that, when you work within the federal and the state agencies, typically within at least the U.S. jurisdictions, they're pretty good at sharing that data. That's pretty baseline for people to understand. So you understand which clients are there, what even projects it can go down to depending on the jurisdiction. So it's super easy on that onboarding side. And as Toby said, they're working on kind of figuring out a bulk upload. So say, you want to change specific systems, or you have an Excel spreadsheet of actually a lot of information you want to upload.
Right.
You don't want to do it manually. They're working on that right now to see how we can easily get it in there. So then you're not working on both systems. You're not working on one, and then you can just easily work on.
I hadn't quite clued into that other side of it. There's that it's a two-way where you as the client are also bringing in a whole bunch of data as well that needs to then match up with what you've pulled.
Yeah, and it's actually quite a good segue to talk more about that land management piece as well. So NewRange owns a bunch of land that it's operating on, and the way that US real land, like a owned property, is treated is very different to how we treat it in Australia. So this was quite a good problem that Claire raised and said, hey, look, the functionality that exists right now in PX4 is not enough in the land management piece. So we said, fantastic. Tell us what information you need. What information do you need to capture in the land management piece? And then on the back of that, we then fully
This could be a completely different, so a different authority that has different regulations.
Owning your own land. So what information do you want to capture against that specific land parcel?
So just to clarify for you, some mining companies not only have the mining lease, they actually own the background tenure. So whether it's the farm or all these blocks of land, that's the land we're talking about. So they actually own the land as well as the mine. Whereas in other places, they might just have the mine and they're compensating the landowner.
Right.
It's just a case of actual land owners.
Mm.
So most of the big players around the world with their biggest projects will end up at some stage trying to purchase the land to make it simpler. And then they've got to manage the land as well, which is what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's more around the land management obligations as well. So as a land owner, you might also have to pay shire rent or shire rates or, council rates and things like that. So on the back of Claire's feedback.
You're laughing.
You said shire rates.
Oh, that's another jurisdiction.
But if it leads into one more thing, they've also adapted to a lot of the terminology within the US in comparison to what they would call it in Australia, as this was first started there, and then as well as in Canada. We use terminology. We don't use Commonwealth Department. It's state, federal. It's very different terminology that sometimes, especially when you have a bulk amount of people viewing the software itself, it's hard to convert that automatically into what that actually is.
I might be wrong, but Bill, this sort of, when we were talking off camera, this sort of relates back to what you were saying, is that PX4 is not built around sort of some other system that's integrated into this system that you've now built and delivered to clients. It's actually, even the stacks are all built by PX4, which gives you that adaptability when you're different terminology in the US, different state by state, different, I mean, Quebec and BC, very different environments, these sort of layers that if you were just plugged into pulling it from a different, basically a pre-made stack, you wouldn't have that flexibility.
No, exactly. Taking that terminology from the acts in each jurisdiction and the actual terminology of that country or that state is really, really important. Because again, if Claire and her team then expand into Ontario and they're looking at the terminology from Minnesota, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't align with the regs, doesn't align with the actual act and the requirements that you need to be looking at. So that terminology piece is really important.
Yeah.
But just to go back to that comment that you just made, Jared, is that when back in 2016, 2017, when we decided that we needed to build a system, that nothing in the market did what we wanted it to do, we also then looked at, could we do a low code? And we looked at all the low code options, including some of the very biggest ones in the world that people use today. And those stacks did not give us the finite detail of the workflows to link everything up. So we've actually got 6 or 7 actual software pieces in our stack to make it work. So we built the whole thing from the base up. So we know every part of how that works. We're not relying on anyone else. We're in fully control of it, so we can create what Claire and Toby are talking about.
And then what about the looking forward? What does it look like for PX? Like you're I think you use the term slurping it off to keep it up to date. Is that another word for, is that an AI system? Is that a program? Is AI coming? Where do you sort of see it coming as? I can't imagine regulations are going to get any less.
No.
So as there's more and more layers, how are you sort of developing?
I think there's 2 parts to that question as well. So on the first part, in terms of actual interaction with the department databases, that's a key part of what we're expanding at the moment. So ensuring that not only are we pulling data from the source of truth, being the regulator, but also auditing that data to show what the department's database is showing against what you have within your PX4 system. Because it's not uncommon that departments make mistakes as well. So the auditing tool within PX4 also highlights when the department has something that's recorded differently to what's recorded in PX4, and it'll tell you, hey, there's a discrepancy between this data. Do you want to accept the change from the department, or are we going to reject it and we're going to call the department and find out what's happened? So the first piece is that the integration and interaction with department databases, that's only going to continue to improve and expand. The other side of the question is around scalability and how we're going to continue to do this into 40, 50, 100, 200 different jurisdictions around the world. So to do that, we have embarked on an AI journey, not unlike many companies in the world at the moment. AI is the buzzword of the year. But so we're using a natural language processing tool that we've called Peak, that we are using to help us scrape the legislation in each new jurisdiction that we're going into. So it's never going to completely eliminate the human element and the subject matter expertise of understanding and how to get an approval. But we're hoping it's going to save us 30, 40, 50% of our time that allows us to scale into new jurisdictions faster. The second part of the Peak tool is that once we're in a new jurisdiction, we can then use our AI model to then scrape for legislative changes so that our tool can also highlight for us where an act has changed. Because again, we maintain the legislation or the currency of every jurisdiction we're in. So if we're in 200 jurisdictions, you can imagine how much legislative change is happening. So we're going to be using our Peak tool to also help us remain current in all of those jurisdictions.
Yeah, AI is one of those things. I hope we get control of it in a way that we can use how incredible it is. Because I mean, we use it in our systems for some of our write-ups and things like that, and it's amazing because you're some people are worried it's taking away jobs. You know, that part of it, and it's like manufacturing. Efficient manufacturing creates more jobs because it gets more efficient. People it's like your role is changing, and you're now able to. My argument has been, if it's handled right, that's a big if. Some people are going to handle it right, and some people are going to handle it wrong because there's still going to be humans making choices. Is that it will actually, in some cases, allow us to be more human, to maximize our own judgment, and because we're not sort of hampered by having to do this 1, 2, 3, you know, and it actually allows us to look at data and information in a way that actually can make decisions and redistribute it out. That's my little theory on it.
So our piece of AI and that tool is when I spoke about a mining act and it can be in black and white, our tool will ultimately do the black and white. However, it won't ever do 100% of what we need because we've now got the grey where we're going to rely on people like Claire and our other subject matter experts from the departments to get the grey. So we'll always have to have that interaction that will take time. But if the black and white works, we could save 50% on the time to scale.
And maximize that interaction that needs to happen.
Exactly.
I was getting.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I think the other really important part of the Peak project is that we have aligned with a major research organization in Queensland, so the Queensland University of Technology, and because they're really, really excited by this tool as well, because being able to categorize different types of legislation and different types of grey and, you know, prescriptive versus non-prescriptive statutes, they were really, really interested in understanding that part of the system more. So we've got an exclusive research partnership with QUT, which is also driving that Peak tool into the future as well, which is really exciting.
Yeah, so it's actually the law faculty of the QUT, and the section we're in, the people in that they're looking at where law intersects with IT. So we're in quite a very specific space within the uni where this research is occurring. They heard about what we're doing, and they hadn't heard of anyone else trying to do it. So subsequently, the research program.
Wow, it's very exciting. Before I wrap up, sometimes I just try to remember. But is there any? We covered a lot of ground here. I had some notes of things I wanted to make sure we covered. Was there anything I missed? Anything that's going on with PX4, announcements, collaborations you've done, anything that we want to capture before we wrap up?
A few months back, we released a white paper, a discussion paper, which is a piece of research on exploration transformative technologies. So what we did was we took a questionnaire out to about a dozen exploration geologists around the world that have found tier 1 mines or have been involved in transformative technologies themselves and created things. And we put 5 questions to them. The first question was, what did tech look like when you started? And the oldest in this space started in 1965. Then there was a few in the early 70s, and this went right through to people starting in the mid-90s. So we had that period. So that was the first question. The second question for them, in your careers, what's the most transformative exploration technology you think has occurred? And from the aeromagnetics to this to that, a whole raft of things. Then we asked them, what do you think will be the most transformative tech into the future? And we got, there's no question around the AI and the robotics and a number of data management. And then we asked them, well, a wish list. If you could change the world, what would be your greatest wish? And these were two really interesting statements that came out of it. One was very much about if you went to the Enterprise and Dr. Spock, and he had his planet analyzer, and he could tell how much copper was in there and where he'd find his link and his titanium and whatever he needed. Bang. That question that was raised saying, can we identify things 2 kilometres underground? Where's the tech that we need right now to supply all the copper in the world? And we need to get 2K down, and we haven't found that tech yet. The other one was that in the junior mining space, and the Toronto Stock Exchange will understand this, the junior space is very cyclical in the money they have. It's a boom bust. However, all of those junior exploration companies are at the forefront of exploration. Some of them are backed by the majors. The majors aren't doing what these juniors are doing. That's where we will find our next deposits, our next tier ones, etc. So a number of the responses was, it would be wonderful if there was a way that we could level out the boom bust, that those explorers could have enough money to keep following their instincts and go and find new things for us. So the paper's online. It was a pretty...
So there's a link, we can put it in the...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a link for it, absolutely.
Yeah, that'll be for anybody watching. Yeah, so link, that's really the description, we'll have that link.
So really interesting read. It's a lot of fun putting it together.
Yeah, and then just quickly, did you just move your office to Perth?
No, we've expanded and opened a new office.
Oh, you've also
okay. Yeah, so my wife and I have relocated to the West Coast. Perth, WA is still the biggest mining jurisdiction in the world in terms of an individual mining jurisdiction. Yeah. And it's the epicenter for mining out of Australia. So having a full-time permanent presence in Perth was really important to us and has been a part of our roadmap for many years. Obviously, COVID didn't help that. But we've now got a team growing in Perth. We've got a number of major projects that are based out of Perth. So having boots on the ground there was really, really important. And a part of our kind of next phase of growth is hoping to expand here into Canada. So looking like we're going to be doing the same thing in Vancouver, with potentially a satellite office over on the East Coast in Toronto. So that's kind of the next 12 to 18 months. We're hoping to have a formal presence over here as well.
Wow.
But the team's growing. The product continues to evolve. We're now looking at things like health and safety, community management, community engagement. So there's a number of new aspects of the system that we're looking into. But we're looking forward to working with more people like Claire, expanding our presence here in the Americas, and obviously then expanding our traction and our footprint in the Africas as well, across the African continent.
I'll just wrap up with a quick question, just to both of you, Bill and Toby, is just since we talked last time you were on the show, how much of what you thought it was going to be, how much of it has been following client demand, also sticking to your vision? How have you sort of found that balance? Maybe I'll start with you and end with Bill. How you sort of found that balance between what we want to do, what the clients are asking us to do? How do we keep moving forward? Tricky balance.
It is. And sometimes you have to say no or not yet. But I think the overarching vision of the jurisdictionally specific kind of tenement and compliance management system, that is the core. That will always be the core. And that's, I think, what resonates with a lot of companies is having that specificity. It's all of the things around that, all of those bells and whistles that sometimes, we've just we released last year an objections module for managing governmental department objections for exploration licenses in WA. We didn't even know that was a problem. But for a client of ours, that was a huge problem. And so we were able to co-design and co-develop a solution within PX4 that allowed them to manage and digitalize the management of those objections. And when we speak to the majors and these big players, there's always something that's a bugbear. Is it health and safety? How do you manage agreement compliance? And I'm sure there'll be other things that we haven't yet, covered off on. But it is a balance between the bespoke functionality, which we try and avoid, We don't like to build something.
That was a good clarification. Actually.
We don't like to build something that will only work for one company.
Yeah.
We would prefer, and we find it's better for the company too. Because if it's something really bespoke, it means if it goes wrong, it affects solely them.
You're speaking my language. Same for us in production.
Yeah. So we're trying to create a solution that's really scalable, but at the same time, we're trying to identify ways to do that within the platform that we've built, within the ecosystem of PX4. So it is a balance.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to say, look, that's not a priority for us right now, but come on the journey with us and let's look at that in the bigger course of the roadmap and where we're going.
Yeah. Very similar to what Toby is saying. If we've got clients where we had the NewRange project came to us and said, we want Minnesota. So we attacked Minnesota and created, we elevated that. So if somebody
so that choosing jurisdiction based on demand.
Tomorrow, a mine or exploration company, and they said we need X, Y, and Z, would be in Africa or Argentina or in the Americas, we would prioritize that and bring it forward.
Right. Yeah.
When we look at adding the modules and the objections one we've talked about, stakeholders, engagement, and agreements, all those things, we'll look at what that request is, and we'll then work out how we can build it for the client, how important that is to the client. What do they need? How big are they? What are they prepared to support? And we'll then take that journey with them and do that.
Right.
So it's very much a bit horses for courses, but again, where's the client? What's their need? Right? But whatever we build, it's available it's our system. We build it. We create it. It sits in our system. People can rent it.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. And Claire, I will say, thanks for coming on. There's a lot of ways you can tell the audience you're a good company, but when a client is actually willing to come on, there's really nothing else that's better than that. And we've got a few great companies that they bring clients on. That's how they do these episodes. And it's always great because we get to add a layer that you just can't add without the client actually there to ask that question. So thank you. Well, thank you all of you for coming on the show. It's been great. I hope this becomes sort of an annual thing because I get the feeling if you're growing like you are, it's not going to stop anytime soon. I certainly hope not.
No, absolutely.
Hopefully, Jared, that we'll be doing from our office in Vancouver.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We'll bring our whole crew here.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll have you back again soon. And like I said, hopefully in Vancouver.
Fingers crossed.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. There'll be links like that white paper that Bill was mentioning. There'll be a link to that, of course, to all the things we've referenced. We'll put as many links as we can in the description. Go check that out. We'll have a link to everybody's LinkedIn as well. So if you want to connect with them directly, that's a great way to do it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will see you on the next episode of Mining Now.